She thought paying tuition was her biggest battle, until her sister secretly sabotaged her scholarship interview, forcing her to choose between exposing the betrayal or pretending nothing happened to keep the family peace. The envelope lay on the table, its edges torn from my trembling hands. I had ripped it open the moment I saw the university's seal, expecting relief, expecting freedom. Instead, the words inside carried the weight of chains. "We regret to inform you." My breath caught and the room seemed to shrink around me. I had fought so hard, sacrificed so much, and in that instant, it felt as if the world had decided I wasn't enough. I remember sitting there, staring at the letter, the silence pressing against my ears. My mother called from the kitchen, asking if the news was good. I couldn't answer. I folded the paper quickly, shoved it under a stack of books, and forced a smile when she walked in. "Still waiting," I lied because I couldn't bear to see her disappointment. She had already carried too many burdens. I didn't want to add mine to the pile. Tuition had always felt like a mountain I was climbing barefoot. Every step cut into me. I skipped meals, telling myself hunger sharpened focus. I worked late shifts at a small cafe, wiping tables until my hands ached, pretending the tips were enough to keep hope alive. My friends laughed about weekend plans, but I counted coins in a jar, whispering promises to myself that one day, all this sacrifice would mean something. The scholarship was supposed to be my escape. I rehearsed for that interview like it was a performance that could save my life. I stood in front of the mirror, repeating answers until my voice grew hoarse. I borrowed shoes from a neighbor, polished them until they shone, and told myself appearances mattered. I even practiced my smile, though it felt heavy, like a mask I wasn't sure I could hold in place. The morning of the interview, I woke before dawn. My sister was already in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, smirked, and said, "Don't be nervous. They probably want someone more polished." Her words stung, but I laughed it off, pretending it was a joke. That was her way, always supportive on the surface but with a sharp edge hidden underneath. I had learned to ignore it, convincing myself family bonds were stronger than envy. I walked into the interview room with my heart pounding. The panels sat in a row, their eyes cool, their expressions unreadable. The first question was expected. Why did I deserve the scholarship? I answered with honesty, speaking about my struggles, my determination, my vision for the future. But something felt off. Their glances carried doubt, as if they had already decided. One of them asked about a rumor, that I wasn't serious about my studies, that I lacked discipline. My throat tightened. Where had that come from? I tried to defend myself, but the air in the room grew heavier with every word. I left the building with a hollow feeling. The streets blurred as I walked home, my borrowed shoes pinching my feet. I told myself maybe it was just nerves, maybe I had imagined their skepticism. But deep down I knew something wasn't right. That night I sat in my room replaying the interview in my mind. Every doubtful glance, every unexpected question gnawed at me. My sister knocked on the door, poked her head in, and asked casually, "So how did it go?" Her tone was light, almost mocking. I forced a smile and said, "Fine." She shrugged, walked away, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she already knew the outcome. Days later, the rejection letter arrived. I hid it, but the silence in my room was crushing. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if all my sacrifices had been meaningless. My mother noticed my exhaustion, asked if I was eating enough, but I brushed her off. I didn't want her to see the cracks forming inside me. Then came the whisper. A friend from campus pulled me aside, lowering her voice. "I shouldn't say this, but your sister spoke to one of the committee members. She told them you weren't reliable, that you weren't ready for the responsibility." My heart stopped. The betrayal was sharper than the rejection itself. I stood frozen, the world spinning around me, trying to process the words. I walked home that evening in silence, every step heavy. My sister greeted me at the door, cheerful, asking if I wanted tea. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time I saw the mask she wore. Supportive smiles, casual jokes, subtle digs. It had all been part of something bigger. She hadn't just doubted me, she had sabotaged me. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I sat in my room, staring at the folded letter, the words blurring through tears. My dreams felt stolen, not by fate, not by failure, but by someone I trusted most. The weight of tuition, the silent struggles, the endless sacrifices, they had all been crushed under the betrayal I hadn't seen coming. And yet, beneath the pain, a spark flickered. She thought she had ended my fight. She was wrong. The scholarship might have slipped away, but my resolve hadn't. I whispered to myself in the darkness, "This isn't over." I couldn't sleep that night. The rejection letter lay folded on my desk, but it wasn't the words on the page that kept me awake. It was the image of my sister's smile. That smile had always seemed harmless, playful even, but now it carried a different meaning. It was the smile of someone who had watched me stumble and enjoyed the fall. The next morning, I decided I couldn't carry the silence any longer. I walked into her room, the air thick with the scent of her perfume, the curtains drawn to let in only a sliver of light. She was sitting at her vanity, brushing her hair with slow, deliberate strokes. I stood there, my voice trembling but firm. "Did you talk to the committee about me?" She paused, her brush midair, then turned to face me. Her eyes were calm, almost amused. "Why would I do that?" she asked, her tone dripping with innocence. But the corners of her lips curled upward, a chilling smirk that told me everything I needed to know. The sting of betrayal cut deeper than any financial burden I had ever carried. Tuition, debt, hunger. Those were battles I could fight. But this was a wound carved by someone I trusted, someone who shared my childhood, my secrets, my laughter. Suddenly, every memory we had together felt poisoned. I thought of the nights we whispered under blankets, the mornings we shared hurried breakfasts before school. Were those moments real, or had she always been waiting for the chance to pull me down? At family gatherings, the imbalance was clear. My mother adored her charm, her effortless way of winning people over. Relatives praised her wit, her beauty, her social grace. I was always the serious one, the girl with her nose buried in books, the one who worked too hard and smiled too little. That imbalance gave her power. She knew how to play the role of the golden child while I was cast as the shadow. I began to notice the subtle ways she manipulated perceptions. At dinner, she would casually mention how tired I looked, how maybe I was taking on too much. My mother would nod, concerned, while my sister's eyes sparkled with satisfaction. To everyone else, she was caring, thoughtful. To me, she was tightening the strings of a puppet show where I was always the fool. One evening, as I walked past the garden, I overheard her speaking to a friend. Her voice carried through the still air, light and mocking. "It was so easy," she laughed. "I just told them she wasn't reliable, that she couldn't handle the pressure. They believed me instantly." My heart pounded as I pressed myself against the wall, listening to her words slice through me. She wasn't just careless, she was proud of what she had done. That moment transformed my grief into something sharper, something burning. Anger surged through me, but it wasn't wild or reckless. It was focused, deliberate. I knew I couldn't confront her openly, not yet. I needed proof, something undeniable. So I began my secret plan. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I searched through old emails, piecing together fragments of conversations. I reached out to sympathetic staff members, those who had always believed in me, asking carefully worded questions. Slowly, a trail of lies began to emerge. Each discovery felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity. A message where she hinted at my lack of discipline. A note suggesting I wasn't serious about my studies. The evidence was fragile, but it was there, waiting to be woven into a truth that could expose her mask. The risk weighed heavily on me. If she discovered what I was doing, she would twist the story, paint me as paranoid, jealous, unstable. She had the charm, the favor, the golden reputation. I had only my determination. But the more I remembered her smirk, the more I knew I couldn't stop. The emotional toll was relentless. Sleepless nights left me hollow-eyed, my mind racing with plans and doubts. At family dinners, I forced myself to smile, to laugh at her jokes, to pretend everything was fine. Inside, I was unraveling. My chest ached with the effort of holding back the truth, of pretending I wasn't broken. Yet beneath the exhaustion, a quiet resolve grew stronger. Every time I remembered her boasting, every time I replayed her denial, the fire inside me burned brighter. Revenge was no longer about anger. It was about restoring my stolen future. It was about proving that I wasn't the shadow she wanted me to be. I began to test her, dropping small hints in conversation, watching her reactions. "Funny how rumors spread," I said one evening, my tone casual. Her eyes flickered just for a moment before she laughed it off. That flicker was enough. It told me she knew I was closing in. I started keeping a journal, documenting every detail, every incident, every word she spoke that carried hidden malice. Writing it down gave me clarity, a roadmap of betrayal that I could follow to its end. One night as I sat at my desk, the rejection letter still tucked beneath my books, I realized something profound. She hadn't just sabotaged my scholarship, she had tried to rewrite my story. But I wouldn't let her. My story was mine and I would fight to reclaim it. The mask she wore was cracking and I was ready to tear it off completely. The folder sat on my desk, its weight heavier than any textbook I had ever carried. Inside were the emails, the notes, the fragments of conversations I had pieced together over weeks of sleepless nights. Proof. Undeniable proof. My sister's betrayal wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was documented, clear, and impossible to ignore. I stared at it, my hands trembling, knowing that holding it meant holding the power to change everything. But power is never simple. As I sat there, the house quiet around me, I felt the crushing weight of the decision pressing against my chest. If I exposed her, the truth would tear through our family like a storm. My mother's trust would shatter, relatives would whisper, and the fragile peace we clung to would collapse. Yet if I stayed silent, I would remain trapped in the shadow she had built for me, my dignity buried under her lies. The conflict gnawed at me daily. At breakfast, my mother smiled warmly at my sister, praising her kindness for helping with chores, for remembering birthdays, for being the cheerful one. Each word was a dagger. I wanted to scream, to throw the folder on the table and shout, "Look at what she's done." But I bit my tongue, forcing a smile, swallowing the truth like poison. My mother's eyes sparkled with pride and I couldn't bear to extinguish that light. One evening, I visited my mentor, a retired professor who had always believed in me. His small study smelled of old books and tea leaves, the walls lined with shelves that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. I sat across from him, the folder clutched in my lap, my voice breaking as I explained the betrayal. He listened quietly, his gaze steady, his silence comforting. When I finished, he leaned forward and said softly, "Silence can be more damaging than truth. Protecting lies only feeds them." His words lingered in my mind long after I left. I replayed them as I walked home under the dim streetlights, the cool night air brushing against my skin. He was right. My silence wasn't protecting anyone, it was protecting her mask. And every day I stayed quiet, I allowed her to tighten her grip on my future. The turning point came unexpectedly. My mother, humming in the kitchen, handed me a plate of food and said, "You should thank your sister. She's been so supportive of you, always speaking highly of you to others." I froze, the fork slipping from my hand. Supportive? The irony was unbearable. I excused myself quickly, retreating to my room where I opened the folder once more. The decision was no longer a choice. It was a necessity. The confrontation happened the next evening. I gathered my courage, my heart pounding like a drum. My mother sat in the living room knitting while my sister lounged on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. I walked in, the folder pressed against my chest, and said firmly, "We need to talk." My sister looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly, but she masked it with a smile. "About what?" she asked, her tone light, almost mocking. I placed the folder on the table, opened it, and spread the papers out. "About this," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. My mother glanced at the papers, confusion flickering across her face. My sister leaned forward, her smile faltering as she recognized the evidence. Emails, notes, testimonies, all pointing to her sabotage. The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. My mother's knitting needles slipped from her hands, clattering to the floor. She stared at the papers, then at my sister, her voice trembling. "Is this true?" For the first time my sister's mask cracked. Her charm, her confidence, her carefully constructed facade, all crumbled. She stammered, tried to deny it, but the proof was undeniable. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for escape, but there was none. She looked small, stripped of the power she had wielded so effortlessly. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. My mother's face was pale, her hands shaking as she tried to process the betrayal. I stood there, my chest tight, torn between relief and sorrow. Exposing her had cost me the fragile peace of our home, but it had given me back my dignity. In the days that followed, the house was different. Conversations were strained, laughter absent. My mother avoided eye contact, her trust fractured. My sister withdrew, her once lively presence replaced by quiet resentment. The peace we had clung to was gone, replaced by a raw, uncomfortable truth. Yet amidst the tension I felt lighter. For the first time I wasn't carrying the weight of silence. I had reclaimed my story, my future, my voice. The betrayal had scarred me, but it had also taught me something profound. Silence is never the answer when your future is at stake. I began to rebuild. Opportunities one thought were lost resurfaced. New scholarships, part-time jobs, mentors who believed in me. Each step forward felt like stitching together the torn fabric of my life. The path wasn't easy, but it was mine, and I walked it with a newfound strength. Looking back, I realized the choice between peace and justice had never been simple. Peace without truth is fragile, temporary. Justice, though painful, brings clarity. And in choosing justice, I had chosen myself. The storm had passed, but its lessons remained. Betrayal had tried to silence me, but I had found my voice. And that voice would carry me forward, stronger than ever.